Hey guys, it's January 7th, and I felt the need for today, instead of going through a bunch of stories going on in the world, was to give a summary of the events that happened yesterday in the DC protests. Here's a summary of everything that happened in the timeline yesterday. Starting us off, we had Mike Pence reject the Trump call to overturn the Biden election. This happened around 1 p.m., and we have a quote from Pence stating, It is my considered judgment that my oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not, Pence wrote in his 3-page letter addressed to the members of Congress. His dramatic break from Trump came minutes before a Republican vice president began presiding over a joint session of Congress. Before the vice president began presiding over a joint session of Congress, which is meeting to declare former Democratic vice president the victor. During this, there was a speech happening by Trump to the protesters going on. And this eventually led to the storming of the U.S. Capitol. During this, there were police officers drew weapons as the rioters broke down the door of the Capitol building and led to brawls. There's this one picture that's been well circulated that you can see in the window here, that there are rioters right up to the halls of Congress, and you can see all of the Congress men and women under their chairs, and then there were also, like, you can see that they evacuated from their chairs, and it was fairly rushed. Just you can see all the papers and everything going on there. Afterwards, we see that law enforcement was pushing to restore order as shots fired and protesters smashed into the Capitol. This is just going in. We see some live shots of just the magnitudes of people there. We know that there was tear gas being used. And eventually we got this tweet from Donald Trump. I'm asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. During this, there were the 2 Capitol Hill buildings were evacuated. This includes the Senate and the Congress. And eventually, during this, there was a shooting in the Congress building where a woman was shot and then eventually killed. During this, the Pentagon says all 1,100 DC National Guard members were deployed to the Capitol, and then later in the day, Virginia did send their National Guard as well. We see from Ralph Northam, who is the governor of Virginia, my team and I are working closely with Mayor Bowser, Speaker Pelosi, and Senate Schumer to respond to the situation in Washington, D.C. Per the mayor's request, I am sending members of the Virginia National Guard along with 200 Virginia state troopers, and the intention with this was to give additional support to the DC National Guard. Next, later in the day, we have from the Daily Wire, Trump addresses nation following violence in DC video statement. In this, we have the Trump stating, I know your pain, I know your hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anyone hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace, so go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel, but go home and go home in peace. Later in the day, roughly around 7 o'clock, there was an announcement here from the Daily Caller that officials announced that the Capitol is secure from rioters. I remember just walking my dog around 3 o'clock. I live in like DC suburbs, seeing a metro train unload a bunch of people that I'm assuming were coming out of the city. Next, we see that YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter removed Trump's video on the Capitol breach. That was the quote that I just read out, which was the call to go home, and the justification being that they thought that the election fraud claim was seen as more of a call to violence than the calls to go home. And I think it's important to have this in the video just to give record of what was happening. Later in the afternoon, we see a tweet done by Cori Bush, and we're starting to get outside of the day events, but I think this is very relevant. I believe the Republican members of Congress who have incited this domestic terror attack through their attempts to overturn the election must face consequences. They have broken their sacred oath of office. I will be introducing a resolution calling for their expulsion. This is extremely unprecedented as a call, and for reference, I found that the similar calls for election for objections by Congress have been made, and my question is, should these individuals in the past be held to the same standard? So I'm just going to go through a couple of them that happened in the last, couple elections. So on that January day in 2001, a procession of Democratic House members, including dozen members of Congressional Black Caucus, protested during the joint session. They spoke of alleged voter suppression in communities of colors and said that votes that were cast had been miscounted. They begged for at least one senator to join them so as to force a debate and a vote on the voter of Florida electors. This was in reference to the Bush-Gore election. Next, 4 years later, in January 2005, joint sessions of Congress heard the Electoral College result from Bush's re-election over Democratic Senator John Kerry of Massachusetts. A House member of Ohio, Stephanie Tubbs Jones, rose to object to the count from her state. It mattered because without Ohio's electoral votes, Bush would not have the 270 needed to win. So this was Bush and Kerry. And then next, in 2017, several members objected to the acceptance of the electoral vote from Trump. Mr. President, I object because people are horrified, said Representative Barbara Lee, Democrat from California. The presiding officer was the vice president of that era, Joe Biden. He asked if that objection was being joined by a senator and was answered in the negative. In that case, Biden said it cannot be entertained. Republicans in the chamber applauded. I think what's different about this situation currently compared to these previous claims is exactly what was being in this last statement here, where Biden had to ask, was there a senator and a congressman, and the answer was in the negative, where in our current case we do have a Republican senator and a Republican congressman, so there will be a debate on the election fraud. I think the big thing to get out of this is we need to allow the laws in place to take their course. The violence that's going on is excessively unheard of, excessively needs to be condemned by both sides of the aisle. What I'm scared of is calling for this type of expulsion claims is just going to rise tension and feed the fire of hatred going on. Thank you for tuning in, and please like and subscribe if you want more up-to-date news, and have a good one.